Okay, Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to our Genesis chapter 14 study.
14.
So last week we went through Genesis chapter 13, where we watched Abraham waver, and how apropos for this message, because earlier this morning Rick talked about faith and how we watched Abraham's faith waver and watch him make his decisions, and then Yah taking him to the vantage point to look down and see the blessing that he was giving them. So we watched how Abraham was able to see from Yah's point of view what he was giving him. So then we go from there and we go into chapter 14, where the condition changes drastically from what he just saw. He went from a mountaintop, and how often, when we get that blessing, when we get that victory, how something is lurking or waiting there to give us an opportunity to still show the faith that we have in Yah that is supposed to be exhibited. So we have 24 verses in this chapter. So let's do 6 verses at a time. Anyone can read the first 6 verses if you want to volunteer. If not, I'll take it.
We're going 14.
Oh, okay. JP raises his hand.
Yeah.
Go ahead, JP.
Genesis chapter 14, starting in verse 1, says, "And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elazar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations, that these made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and with Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zaor. All these were joined together in the vale of Sedum, which is the salt sea. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the 14th year came Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him, and smote the Rephaims in Ashtaroth, Karnaim, and the Zuzims in Ham, and the Emims in Shaveh Kirathaim, and the Horites in their Mount Seir unto El-Paran, which is by the wilderness."
Oh, man, you want to pull out anything you see there?
I think today was the first day I realized that there was a king of Sodom and a king of Gomorrah. But that was pretty much all I really noticed.
Okay.
And then also, again, I know there's more to the Rephaims.
Oh, yeah.
In 5. So I'd have to look up that word to kind of realize what that is. But yeah, that's about it, brother.
The king of Elam, that's pronounced Chedorlaomer. Chedorlaomer for everyone listening. So, Rick, you want to add something?
I guess I got to unmute myself. No, I don't really see a whole lot other than what he pointed out. I didn't realize there was a king of those two either. But other than that, a whole lot of names that are hard to speak.
Okay. Well, the interesting thing about this is obviously the names mean something, but there's also a path. This is a path that is leading through a very, very rich territory. We talked about, a couple of weeks back, we talked about bitumen, which is asphalt, which was a residue of the oil And if you remember, we talked about how the Gettys and the Rockefellers, they went to the particular area, and wherever they saw that bitumen, that's where they drilled, and that's how they made their fortune. So this, not only is this a rich land, but these are all the lands that they're going through are all allies of Sodom, and how they're individually picked off. So I want to say a little bit more about the names, but Wes has his hand raised. I'm gonna let him speak. Go ahead, Wes.
Hey, can you hear me? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Just wanted to make a comment about Sodom and Gomorrah. Usually when we say Sodom and Gomorrah, we're only thinking of one city, but Sodom and Gomorrah was actually multiple cities in the region. So there was separate kings, like there was the king of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah, and together they were Sodom and Gomorrah. And you can, I mean, we'll see a little bit more of that later, but then in Genesis 19, it actually goes and breaks down how Lot, when he was escaping, he was going to try to go to a smaller city next to Sodom and Gomorrah, and then even there, the father told him to leave that as well. And I believe the place is Zohor he went to, and even that was bad as well, so he was told to leave. But I thought I'd throw that in there.
Absolutely. Arioch, it says Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elisar. So king of Arioch was of the giants. And where it says Chedorlaomer of Elam, Elam would have been ancient Persia at that time. But as we walk through and we get down to verse 5, JP brought out something that we definitely need to pay attention to, because not only is Arioch of the giants, but then we have verse 5 where it says, in the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him came and attacked the Rephaim in Ashtaroth, Karnaim, the Zumim in Ham, the Emim in Shaveh, Kirithaim, and the Horites in their mountain of Zaire, Seir. So it says that they're on their way down to Sodom and Gomorrah. Wes did a good job of explaining there's two cities there, but they didn't just go attack Sodom and Gomorrah, which is where Lot was, right? They attacked all of the allies of Sodom and Gomorrah first, those that would help. And all of these kings they attacked, cities they attacked, were cities of giants. Rephaim means the strong ones. And all of these giants in Rephaim, the Zuzims and the Emims, they were all in league with Sodom and Gomorrah. So Rephaim means the strong ones. The Zuzims means the powerful ones. And the Emims means the terrible ones. So these were known giants. It tells us in Deuteronomy chapter 2. Let me turn there right quick. Deuteronomy chapter 2. I'll read verse 20. And it says, that was also regarded as a land of giants. Giants formerly dwelt there. But the Amorites called them the Zamzummim. So here we have in Genesis, it calls them the Zumins, but the Amorites call them the Zamzummim. So there was, I don't know what Zam means, but it was something extra they added on to the Zumins that were already called the powerful ones, right? A people of great and numerous and tall as the Anakim. But Yah destroyed them before them, and they disposed them and dwelt in their place, just as he had done for the descendants of Esau who dwelt in Seir, when he destroyed the Horites before them. They disposed them and dwelt in their place even to this day. So there was a specific direction that Yah was taking them in destroying all of these giants that were allies and in kin with Sodom and Gomorrah. In other words, he took out their flanks. He gave them nothing else to grab onto for strength. So this was purposeful, because we didn't read verse 7 yet, but when we see and misfat means the spring of judgment. So this was Yah's direction he took them on to bring these giants to the spring of judgment. So I just wanted to add that in. Anyone have anything else to add there? JP?
Yeah, well, looking at the words, what's interesting is, the word that we have in the chapter 14 of Genesis, it's H2104, and it says Zuzim, which means, well, it says prominent Zuzites, an aboriginal tribe of Palestine, and the outline of the biblical usage using the Blue Letter Bible says equals roving creatures, right? Roving creatures. And then the other word that we pulled up from the Deuteronomy passage, it's Zamzom, which is H2157. It says intriguing, a Zamzumite or tribe, native tribe of Palestine, but this one equals plotters. So one was the Deuteronomy passage as plotters, and the other is as roving creatures. So I don't know, that's kind of interesting. I mean, you got one, the initial tribe that we're seeing in Genesis is I think would be the 2104. Yeah, 2104 would be roving creatures. So, I mean, it's almost like they transitioned into plotters, but I don't know, it's some crazy.
I like that because, anytime the enemy is described, it's always described as lurking, roaming, seeking whom he may devour. It tells us in Psalms 1 that the wicked were those that were scheming and plotting on wickedness when there was none visible. They invented it. So that definitely ties into everything that we're seeing here with these giants, these creatures. Well, I don't know about creatures, but giants, as we know. But and I want to add this too. Like we were talking about faith earlier. In the message and discussing it, even talking about how it was affecting us personally, and how could they defeat these giants without having faith? Because we talked about how true faith is understanding in the existence of you not having your own strength. And this is a prime example of facing someone and your strength being of null and void. Yeah. Like you can't face a giant like this, a creature, someone's lurking, waiting for you, unless Yah has your back.
Exactly.
Yep.
They kind of remind me of, when Moses sent the 12th spy, against the giants, when they were like, 12 spies were like, man, these people are like giants. And like, we look like grasshoppers. But what happened is they forgot that, Yahuah is the one that fights for them. So they were looking at things from the physical aspect instead of looking at things from, Yahuah is the one that's fighting for me. And that was a matter of faith. You know what I'm saying? It's the same thing with the situation. So it's like, you're facing giants that we know physically we cannot defeat. We cannot defeat by ourselves. And it's the same thing in our spiritual walk when it comes to faith. There are things that we cannot do by ourselves if we don't rely on Yahuah. And I think in the situation with the giants is, you know, this battle that the Israelite will be facing is that only Yah can be able to defeat these people if they are faithful to his wisdom, his power, instead of looking at things from the physical aspect.
Absolutely, Kev. Very good point. Who wants to take the next 6 verses?
I'll take them. All right, we're 7, right? And they turned back and came to En Mizpah, that is Kadesh, and smote all the country of the Amalekite, and also the Amorite who dwelt in Katzon Tamar, and the sovereign of Sodom, and the sovereign of Amor, and the sovereign of Admar, and the sovereigns of Sabine, and the sovereigns of Bela, that is Seor or Soar, went out and joined together in battle in the valley of Siddim against Edomer, sovereign of Elam, and Tidal, sovereign of Goim, and the Amraphel, sovereign of Sinar, and the Ariok, sovereign of Alasar, and sovereigns against. And the valley of Siddim had many tar pits, and the sovereign of Siddim and Amorah fled and fell there, and the remainder fled to the mountains. And they took all of the goods of Sodom and Amorah and all of their food and went away. Going to there, 12, right? Doing
Yes.
6. Again, a lot of these different valleys, it's definitely, I'd like to definitely look through and see the words, what they mean. I know there's another story probably for us to find within that context as well. But I see here, you know, that they're taking their stuff and they're fleeing. You know, they're leaving this area, and it's probably because of the attacks that we're seeing played out in the verses before that. So, and they took all the goods of Sodom and Amorah. So it seems as though those two must have been pretty close in vicinity, I guess, that they're pretty much named always together. You know, are they like sister cities, or, you know, that's kind of interesting that we always see them linked together for some reason, and all of their supplies and everything. So at this point, they must have almost kind of united in a sense, is what I'm getting here, you know, that they're fleeing and they're uniting their stuff together, it seems, maybe.
Yeah. What came to my mind was verse 8, which I never thought about. I didn't know that actually. The king of Bela, which is the same thing as Zor. You know, and I remember when Lot fled to Zor, I never thought that, you know, it was different. You know, King Bela is the same thing as Zor. So, you know, it came to my mind when Lot was, you know, retrieving from Sodom and Gomorrah, and he wanted to flee to Zor. So I was wondering why Zor, but I guess, you know, that came to my mind with the scripture right here.
Yeah, I definitely see, Rick, what you were saying as far as the two cities. You know, we know of the sexual immorality that was going on there, but I think that there was an exceeding wickedness there, even more so than just that. You know what I mean? That lied there, that lurked there, and they were in alliance together, and all of the cities around them agreed as well. And not only were they fighting, you know, to conquer, they were fighting to keep their way of life as well, and to pull people in to join them in their wickedness. So I think all of that goes into what they were trying to build here. And you will always see this in scripture when it talks about wickedness. Wickedness wants to devour and pull in everything and everyone around it. You know, to join in their ultimate destruction. Right? So, what else we see there?
I'm going to take a look at those couple words. I'll see if I can see anything in there. Anybody got anything else?
Verse 10, they mention the asphalt pits in the valley of Siddim, which was filled with asphalt pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. So, again, this to me talks about the richness of the land, unless someone else sees something different there. Because immediately following it says they took all of the goods, and then verse 12, they also took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. So they kidnapped him. You know what I mean? So now there's even more urgency for Abram to head this direction. Go ahead, Wes.
Yeah, just wanted to point out something in verse 12, because in the previous chapter in 13, we were talking about how Lot decided to choose the nicer plain, and he set up his tent facing, Sodom and Gomorrah, or Sodom. So he set up his tent facing it. He wasn't in it, but then now you see in Genesis 14, he's in it, which again shows his mentality of what he was actually looking for. And the transition was quick. I mean, it's quick. Of course, there's a little bit of a time gap. It doesn't really quite say in detail, but it was quick of just setting up the tent, and then now he's in Sodom. And then we'll see later on, Genesis 19, the whole story of how he fully in there and his family.
Absolutely. I think sometimes, because I'm remembering, even in Isaiah chapter 30, the Israelites, they wanted to go back through the Negev, where the fiery flying serpents were, where the young and old lion were, meaning where the old lion was teaching the young lion how to hunt, to go back just to be in the shadow of Egypt. So maybe not there, but on the perimeter. And like you just pointed out, Lot went back just to be in the shadow of what he was looking for, and eventually he jumped full into the water. Not just his feet weren't just at the edge, getting wet, twinkling his toes in the water. Nah, I want to swim in this air.
And what's crazy is after you see in the chapter, this whole thing goes down with him and the situation that Abraham had to do. He still stays in Sodom.
Yep, absolutely. And the struggle later we see of his wife, wanting to turn back and turn into a pillar of salt, and how his heart was still there, even in leaving. So, but I don't want to jump ahead of myself. Go ahead, man. That's easy to do, right?
No.
One other thing I see that's pretty interesting when we're reading this, we see that it mentions that these bad places is always being Palestine, and we see that same theme being played out today, with Yisrael or Israel, as we see them today, how they are almost, there are arguments over who is the real possessor of that land and that territory. It's kind of interesting how we see that this all described here in Genesis. In the very beginning, there was this dispute, and we see that Palestine was actually there before it was given to Israel, So they were. Isn't that interesting how that controversy could play out? Because Yahuah says, I give you this land now. So now there's this dispute playing out today of who does it really belong to, and Israel claims it's to be theirs because of their heritage, but there's a serious principle here that the Palestinians were really there first, even though they're the bad people. It's still fighting against Israel today. That's crazy.
Yeah, because the land of Canaan was always promised to Abraham and his seed.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you see all these nations encamp on these lands of Canaan, these were the lands, these are the enemies of Yasharel. Well, Yah was promising these lands to the people of Israel, to the Israelites. So it's constantly a battle because Asatan knows. This is why it's going on today, because Asatan knows that he wants to take over that place and make chaos, because he know that the promise is for the children of Abraham in the future. But that's why so much chaos there, because he know that the land of Canaan is for his people. Today, that promise.
You know what else I wanted to point out that I see that this is the first war in Scripture. You know, this is the first time we see war, but how Yah's wars were always a battle unto righteousness. You know, and how we can get caught up in the wars of even today, some being meaningless, some having nothing to do with righteousness, and we can just watch it, you know, sit back and sometimes watch it like a football game or a basketball game or a baseball game, like it's entertainment, or we're watching and there's kids being killed, families being ripped apart, and it has nothing to do with righteous war as we see here in Scripture. So I think this is very important to look at those contrasts, you know, because even in the believer's world, there can be a tying to what they see versus what Yah wants. You know, people, just because it's a war doesn't mean it's a righteous war. There's greed involved, you know, there's personal interest involved, there's land involved. It's not always dealing with the righteousness that Yah speaks about in Scripture. So I just want to point that out as well. We should keep an eye on that.
Praise Yah.
Isn't that kind of like he's like purging out the sin of the land, you know? Kind of the same thing he does with us, you know? He purges the sin out of our temple, our area, you know? Because we're always seeing him all the way through here in the Tanakh. He's always cleaning out the detestable and the sin, you know, the people that are against him, the enemies of Yasharal, you know? And so in a larger sense, you know, doesn't he call Yasharal his son as well? So it's like, you know, maybe that's the parallel of even to the land and us as his children, his sons, you know, that he's always purging the evil out of the land, whether it's the physical land or the spiritual land, you know, of our temples. So I don't know, that's just something that I just thought of here to kind of interesting in my thought.
That's a good thought. It's a very good thought.
Well, thank you, guys.
I did see. I talked about earlier. Verse 7 says, "Then they turned back and came to En Mishpat, which En Mishpat means the spring of judgment. That is Kadesh. So that would mean it's Yah's judgment, I would presume, on those lands, right? I found that interesting, and attacked all the country of the Amalekites, also the Amorites who dwelt in Hazazon and Tamar. So, you know, a pure picture of the judgment of Yah, you know, in the place of judgment. The spring of judgment means a spring. We think of life, you know, there's a spring, there's an abundance of judgment going on at this place at this time with the falling of these giants. So just those little things that, you know, I never pay attention to sometimes before in previous reading, and now we look at them now and they make sense. The meanings of the names make sense, you know, specifically to our understanding, and, you know, how we, you know, are to see it and incorporate it into our lives and daily walk. So,
so we're up to what, verse 12?
Yeah, we're starting in verse 13.
13, I read. And there came on that had escaped and told Abraham the Hebrews, for he dwelt in the plain of Mar, the Amorites, brother of Ashil and brother of Aner, And these were confederate with Abraham. And when Abraham heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them into Dan. And he divided himself against them. And he and his servants by night, and smote them, and pursued them unto Hobah, which is on the left hand of Damascus. And he brought back all the goods, and also brought again his brother Lot, and his goods, and the woman also, and the people. Praise Yah.
Go to 18.
18, verse 17. Right?
Yeah, read 17. Yeah, stop at 18.
And the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Shedemor of the kings that were with him at the valley of Shabbat, which is the king's dell. And Melchizedek, the king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was a priest of the Most High El. Hallelujah.
It's a lot here to discuss.
Yeah, verse 13 is it's really good because you know, all these people became a confederate against the people of Abraham and his, you know, his tribe, or the Israelites. Well, it was not the Israelite at the time, but it was Abraham. It kind of brought me back to Psalms chapter, I think Psalms 82, when they made a confederate against the people of Israel to destroy them. And there was always a confederate to destroy Yah's people. So it reminded me of that, you know what I'm saying, when it came to the gathering of the nations to destroy Yah's people.
Also, verse 13, first time we see the word Hebrew, right? Coming from the word Eber, the name Eber rather, which we saw in the Table of Nations in Genesis chapter 10, crossing over, meaning to cross over. So the very first time the word Hebrew used here, I saw that. Anybody else?
Verse 14.
Like I said.
Verse 14 is good. It says, and when Abraham heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born of his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. So this is really interesting. This is why Abraham is called the father of all faith. Because not only he was faithful, but he was a man of actions when it comes to his people. He trained his servants for battle. You imagine 300. We hear a lot of movies about the 300s, right? Abraham had around 300 and what? 318. And when you're talking about 318 trained men dealing with nations, there were probably millions. There had to be. All right, hundreds of thousands. He's fighting against about 5 nations probably. And this man, Abraham, a man of faith, took time to train this man, take action, to be like, you know what? Even though I have faith, I'm going to train my man too, because we're going to be able to defeat these people. And you know what I'm saying? So to me, it's amazing the faith of Abraham, how he was not overwhelmed by all this. I mean, he was so strong in Yahuah. His faith was so, I mean, it's tremendous. I mean, who can be able to have that type of faith like that? You know what I'm saying? And I mean, we can't, and that's why we always have to imitate his faith, because that's why he's called the father of, the father of all faith, because Abraham was constantly faithful, constantly thinking about the promise. And that's what I see in this verse right here.
Absolutely, I agree. I mean, we talked about, when things look bleak is when, the faith is to shine through most, when we need to lean the most, I think of it like 300. What were these servants? Were they field hands? Did they work in the house? Did they make pottery? And they're going up against men of war. You know, the faith that was necessary, it was needed to have, you know, what was needed to have faith that these men could take out these armies, you know, had to be great. And I think the fact that you brought out that this action of faith is one of the reasons why he's looked at the way he is when it comes to faith, you know.
But he took action. That's the thing, you know. So he was faithful, but he took action. He trained his man. It's the same thing when it comes to our spiritual walk. We can have faith, but where's our action? Are we training? Are we doing this? You know what I'm saying? Are we making, you know, are we training our minds, our spiritual, our physical bodies, our spiritual bodies? It's very important that we constantly remind ourselves when it comes to faith. There must be action in deeds like Abraham, the fact that he was able to do that.
And, you know, when I look at verse 14, Abraham heard that his brother was taken captive. You know, what does that mean practically to us? You know, we
got
lose.
my boy.
Huh?
They got my boy.
Right. You know,
Let's go get it.
In a practical sense, spiritual sense, like, you know, we lose people in the faith to them going back to Egypt. Like, do we go get them? You know, or do we just say, nah, you know, yeah, he's off, she's off, you know? Nah, we go get them and at least make that first attempt, you know, to go search for that brother, to go search for that sister and fight. You know, this is a war. It's a spiritual battle, and sometimes they don't know where their weapons are. You know, they're looking at things that will kill them and they think it's pleasure, right? We have to help breathe life back into them. And I think in a practical sense, we have to be mindful of that as well, to go after that brother, that sister, that broken leg sheep. So
one other thing too, you mentioned that that's the first place that word Hebrew comes up, but the actual word there is Ibri, Strong's 5680, which basically is another name for a Yisraelite, you know, possibly comes from Eber, you know.
Right.
And then we break down what that word meant last week, Eber, wasn't it?
Yeah, crossover, right?
Right.
Yeah, we talked about that.
So a lot of people say that Hebrews aren't necessarily Yisraelites or Yisraelites, but we see with this particular word that they translate as Hebrew actually means Israelite, you know, that's another word for it. So the actual word Hebrew basically is interchangeable, I guess, in that sense. Because it's not really, that's the Hebrew word comes from the NASB translations, but the actual meaning and stuff, it has nothing to do with Hebrew, you know. So it's interesting that they put that word in there, Hebrew, you know, when it actually is probably more accurate as a Israelite, you know, the very first one, probably, I guess, wouldn't it be?
Good point.
That's different. That's new to me, brother. Rick.
Wes,
Never heard that one before. So, I mean, it's interesting. Never heard that one before.
You wanted to add something, Wes?
Yeah, just talking about verse 14, when it's talking about Hebrew, the word Eber comes or I can't pronounce it right, but it comes from Eber, the person Eber in Scripture, and he had a line of children, and it just so happens that name or the title is given only to the children who's actually following the father. It's not given to his other children, even though they're from the same line by blood, but they're only given to those who are actually applicable to crossing over. So even though it's a name, the name, it has a deeper meaning. Just because you're by blood, you don't actually have that name. It's by your, you know, your action, the spirit in you. That's what gives you that name.
Absolutely. That is the point.
That was the point right there that I was trying to get to. So
those that follow, those that make teshuvah, turn to Torah, Those are the Hebrews. Great point.
Those are the Yisraelites, you know, as I've heard y'all say before. You know, it's not about your skin color or your DNA, as people are trying to equate these days. You know, it really comes back to even the Gentiles that are grafted in. Even the wild ones got to be grafted back in again to be a Yisraelite. So, you know, I see that here because it's Abraham is the father, right, of our Amunah, you know, and we all are Yisraelites. If that word that we say Hebrew, but it actually it means Yisraelite. So now we are all Yisraelites that are coming back and crossing back over, coming and returning back, right?
Without
So it's interesting when you look at that name, how it's so much deeper than just a simple word Hebrew, you know?
Mm-hmm. JP?
Well, I was just looking at verse 17 and trying to understand, like, you know, because it says, and the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Chedor Lamor, I can't say that one, and of the kings that were with him at the valley of Shava, which is the king's dale. And as I was kind of looking back, I had noticed, like in verse 2, it talks about them, was it 2? Where they came together, and verse 3, and all these were joined together in the vale of Siddim, which is in the Salt Sea. And it's like they joined. I mean, is this saying that at one time that they came together with Sodom and Gomorrah?
Well, verse 4 shows that they rebelled again. So they were together, and then they rebelled, and this is where we're in it now.
But then verse 17, they met up again.
Well, this was after Abram won the battle and took the goods and killed the kings that went up against Sodom and Gomorrah. And then now they're meeting again. Yeah.
So at this point in verse 17, they're kind of like good again.
Yeah. They're receiving their goods again, and they're coming. Yeah. Before, the war is pretty much over.
So it's like that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, they want to collect the spoils at this point.
Yeah, I hear you.
For sure. Right, anyone else before we move on? Verse 18 to the end. Who wants to take that?
I'll do it.
Go ahead, Wes.
Yeah. It says, and Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand. And he gave him tithes of all. And the king of Sodom said unto Abram, Give me the persons, and take the goods to thyself. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted up my hand unto Yahuah, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread, even to a shalet, I don't know, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich, save only that which the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men which went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their portion.
It's a whole lot here, brother.
Yes, there is. I guess. Huh?
Go ahead.
Yeah. I'll bring up Melchizedek later, but I just want to bring up the way Abram. In verse 23, in verse 22, Sodom is trying to give him portions. It's like, hey, just give me the persons, you can have the riches. But Abram is showing his faith in the Father right now. So that his Father will take care of him. He wants no one to have the right to say that we gave him riches and it wasn't the Father provided. And Abraham didn't want that to happen because he wanted just the Father to provide, and all glory, all I guess you could say the beginning of his riches are from the Father without a doubt. And you can see his faith growing in that manner.
And I think I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think to add to that, there's something to say about him rejecting anything that comes from a wicked man.
Mhm.
Like, it's important that we not only we know where our resources go, but where we get our resources from. How are they gained? Is there something that can be said about our riches and the blessings? Are they truly blessings, or is it something different? Is it ill-gotten gains? And
Well, you can see from the wicked their mindset that Abraham already thought was they're going to say, "I made him rich." It wasn't no God in the desert. I made him rich, and that's like the wicked mindset of like, "Oh, I did this."
Great point. Great point. And obviously, Abraham says, Yahuah the Most High, El Elyon, giving him high praise. But the contrast between Melchizedek and the king of Sodom, direct contrast between the two and how they're looked at and received. Come on now, Hebrews.
Well, the question is, many probably is thinking about it right now. Who is Melchizedek, king of Salem?
There it is.
I know it was in your heart already. I know you guys were thinking about it already.
You see it.
Yeah, I see it oozing out.
The wheels turning.
There's many answers to that. I mean, in the past, to me, it changed my mind, though. I don't think like that anymore. I used to think it was Yahusha back then, but definitely I don't think it's Yahusha. But it must come from somewhere. It must come from a man of the line of Shem. It must be someone from the line, from the bloodline. Me personally, I believe that it was, of course, from the line of Shem. But at the same time, I mean, what's your thought? I mean, just what you think it is. I mean, you think it's someone that's different, or do you think it's from the line of Shem, or what's your thought?
Well, I mean,
it should be.
I'll wait. Go ahead, Wes.
No, biblically, it doesn't actually, for this specific moment in verse 18, it doesn't say who exactly was the Melchizedek, king of Salem. But I mean, just looking at the Melchizedek, where it's mentioned in Hebrews 5, and Melchizedek is an order, it's a priesthood. And it's an order that, of course, the Messiah also took an oath as well, including Yahuah is the one who started this oath in Psalms. I believe it was Psalms, let me just get it up right. Psalms 110, where the oath was, and he's giving that same oath in Psalms 110 to his son, which, of course, is Yahusha. And what's crazy is the word Salem, because, of course, Salem is the short version of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So there was Jerusalem at this time, and this was the high priest. And you can tell that Abram knows who this Melchizedek person is, being a high priest of the Father, because he paid tithe to him. And this is the same order that we're called to, not to the order of Aaron. We're called to the order of the Melchizedek priesthood. Now, who it is, I did hear, I believe it's in the book of Jasher in the Apocrypha.
It says Shem.
Yeah, I heard Shem. I don't believe it's Yahushua because the description is a man, is an actual man. But I mean, Shem would make sense but I'm just looking at it historically because his line was pretty close with the father.
Exactly.
But I don't know. I mean, that can only be speculation. But
Abraham, it sounds like Abraham already knew this person. You know what I'm saying? It's not like it was somebody that he just came by no. It sounds like he had some type of understanding about who this person was. So it must be.
I see more his understanding is he knew who this high priest of Yah was.
Yeah.
Now, because I don't believe he knew Shem,
Right.
Due to the fact that, I mean, Abraham came from a pagan nation and he knew not God, so he knew nothing about him. Because I know Jasher says that Abraham was actually brought up with Shem and Noah. Shem taught him and Noah taught him, but then again, in scripture says he came from a pagan nation and he didn't know God. So Jasher is kind of contradicting on that end.
But at this point, it seems like he's in a whole different place. He knows Yahuah.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying to you? He knows Yahuah. He's not, you know what I'm saying? That's the past. The pagan nation, that's his understanding right now. It seems like he has about understanding of, since, you know, for a while, that it sounds like he has, okay, he knows who this person is because he's aware who he's going to. So I think it's more of like, okay, he was aware, I need to go to this person for this tithing and this offering.
Well, I wonder if this is the first, I know this is the first time it mentions
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Abraham meeting, but I think there's a very good possibility that he's actually met this Melchizedek, you know, before, to know who he is, or that he's from the Most High.
They had to know each other, because when he was blessing him, you know, he made a statement here that to be Abram of the Most High, Al, the possessor of the Shamayim in the earth, and then it goes on and says it again down later in 22. It's repeating it again, so he understands who Abram is and who he believes and who's leading him, and he being the high priest Melchizedek, you know, he was chosen of Yahuah, so they were definitely, if not more, nothing more than united spiritually by the Ruach, I believe, in this sense, you know. But I think they definitely had contact for him to know what Abram believed and who Abram was, or in that sense, you know, Abraham.
Because you ain't gonna bless somebody without knowing.
Yeah, you're not.
I mean, exactly. You could.
I wanted to offer another take on that. Like, not that I disagree with what was said, because I do, and I think there's definitely things that point that direction. But could it be? It's a question. I mean, I don't know either. I don't know who Melchizedek was, but could it be that there was a clear marker with the bread and the wine that Melchizedek brought, that Abraham would recognize that as being someone of the same Most High? You know what I mean? Because
it was the priest that made the statement, though, wasn't it? Melchizedek priest.
Yeah, but that's what caused him. He made the statement, but that's what caused Abraham to give him a tithe, right? Mm-hmm. So that was my point. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with any of you. I'm just adding that to the equation. So it might be something we want to look at.
It could definitely. I mean, I could see it just by speculation. But if we could see that there's a moment, this is just telling us clips of the events that's going forth. We don't know if he met him like an hour, 2 hours earlier. And since this is the high priest of the father probably told him to go talk to Abram, and then Abram's like, whoa. I mean, you just revealed something to me. You're definitely, or we don't see that. Now, there's a possibility he knew him before, and there's a possibility he knew him just then. I think, I'm in between on that one, just because I get stuck on speculation sometimes.
I think you're right. I think what you're assessing there, Rod, is probably accurate, because they did recognize through the ceremonial, aspects of what he was doing here. Not everybody does that. That's a set apart type of a ceremony.
To this day, that's with Yahusha. Right. He is the bread. He is the wine. So I think there's definitely something there, and that would have been the marker that Abraham recognized. But I agree with you guys as well. I don't know. I know in Jasher it says the same was Shem. Speaking of Melchizedek. Just kind of feels like it was just plopped in there. There's nothing, if that's the case, it should be more description about it. And because this is all we have, I don't know that we can know, so I definitely don't dismiss it, though, because there are things that point to it being who Shem's line is, being that is the messianic line. So I don't think that we can dismiss any of it, but I think there's a lot to talk about within that, right?
Yeah, no, I definitely see the reason why it wasn't mentioned who exactly was it, because the purpose was to focus on the Melchizedek, not to focus on the individual who was the Melchizedek priest at that time. Nothing's wrong with it, though. I've went into Jasher and tried to see, because people were telling me that it was Shem. It's just the inconsistency I was seeing in that. But there's possibilities. I don't know, but who knows? I may be revealed later on.
Yeah.
is this stating that the Melchizedek was a sovereign or a king?
A king,
Also?
yeah.
He was the king of Salem or Jerusalem.
Jerusalem, yeah.
So he was a king and the priest or the high priest.
Yeah,
That's kind of a unique position, isn't it?
It is.
it is. It definitely is. That's why I definitely see this pointing to the Messiah, because the Messiah has this, and this is the earthly version that's showing us the physical. And it like even the word Melchizedek, it's a royal. I had it. It's royal. It's two words put together.
King of Salem.
It's royal and righteousness put together to make Melchizedek.
Describe exactly what we see here happening.
Yeah, priest,
Mhm.
priest and king, because there were kings. There weren't priests and kings,
No.
right? David was king. He wasn't priest. You know, Messiah was prophet, priest, and king. So he added something else to it. So, but yeah, man, that's a beautiful point. Priest and king. Because there's no other like it. Only Messiah could match that, right?
And this would also show that Salem or there was a Jerusalem at that time. Now, who was it inhabited by? Probably the Palestinian individuals that were there. But if their king was the high priest of the Father, then I would conclude that they also worship the Father.
I like that conclusion. Amen. All right. This concludes our Genesis chapter 14 study. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.